Welcome to my online painting with pencil presentation. This is a keynote presentation that I normally do in my painting with pencil class, and it's actually here to show you and to demonstrate the building of an image using grayscale. Now, why grayscale? Grayscale is very important in both drawing and painting because every color is a grayscale, and almost everything you see is built based on grayscale. Let me give you an example. Here is a beautiful example of grayscale, the dark squares and the light squares in a checkerboard. And of course, we have a shadow falling across that checkerboard. One thing I'm going to be talking about a whole lot in this process is how grayscales are always relative to the grayscale next to it. And let me show you what I mean. We have the dark square A and the light square B. That's what they look like to your eye. But they're only that relative to the grayscales that are next to them because, in fact, they're exactly the same gray. Let me show you another example of that. Here's a grayscale from white on the left to black on the right. Now, if I run a gray along the middle, you can see it as dark on the right and light on the left. But in fact, it's only dark on the right and light on the left because it is compared to its opposite in behind. It's exactly the same gray all the way along. We'll put it back in, and you can see the right-hand side starting to lighten up. And it only lightens up because you see it compared to black as opposed to the left-hand side of the same gray compared to white. So when we're going to do a drawing, we're going to be using, in this case, because of the slide version, it's a brownish colored paper. But when you're going to do a drawing, you have to remember that all grayscale on the drawing, in the drawing, is relative. So first thing I like to have you do is take a photograph, the photograph you're going to draw from, and visualize it on the paper. I want you to visualize it. I want you to be able to see it. Spend a little bit of time visualizing it physically on the paper. And then when it comes time to actually draw it, you have a better sense of what you're looking at. It's kind of like you're filling in the blanks. So when we start to draw from the photo reference, you start to put it in lightly. Now I want you to make sure you put it in lightly because in this process you're never ever going to get to use an eraser. This is about doing it straight ahead. It's never turning back. If I had you use an eraser, I'd have students who would spend all day putting lines on and erasing them, another line and erasing them. It's not about moving back. It's about keeping going forward. So as we start to put more lines on, you can start to see the sides of the face start to come into play, and then we put some eyebrows into place. Now these are lightly sketched in because I want you to be able to move them if you need to, or be able to work around images, sections of the image that aren't quite correct. And I'll show you what I mean. As we start to put in more lines, everything is compared to what's already there. The eyes can be put in now that the eyebrows are put in approximately the right place, which the eyebrows are put in based on where the hairline was. So as we build it down and start bringing other parts of the face into play, because we have something to refer to, some part of the body we've already drawn in that is approximately where it's supposed to be. Now we can refer to it. So we'll keep drawing. Now I've got the nose in place. Once I put the nose in place, I realized that my initial drawing of the chin was too long. I essentially went too far. I had no reference for how long the chin was supposed to be. So the chin now is too long. The nose is approximately right size for the eyes and for the hair, or at least pretty close. But the chin is too long. So what do we do about it? If I put a line in the wrong place, the first thing to do is put it in the right place. Just add it to the correct place. And don't worry about the line that's in the wrong place. You notice as soon as I put it in place, then I was able to tell how far down to put the mouth. And I've got the mouth in place now. And then we just keep going. So as we keep drawing stuff in, again, just the edges, just the outside edges of things. Make sure you get the shapes in the right place. Make sure that you get everything relatively correct in its size, proportion, and location. Make sure you get everything in place, all the little details. Keep putting them back in, a little bit here. Also, when you start to get stuff in place, you can now start to do some more shading and add more elements. Let me show you what I mean. We've also started putting the background in. Don't forget the background. It's very important. It builds, it supports, it adds directional thrust. So we start putting more detail into place. You can start to make them shaded areas now. As you can see, we've got shades in the eyes, we've got shades along the face. And I want you to notice that there's scribbles. I'm not turning the pencil sideways. I want you to always use the tip of the pencil. I want you to always do a scribble motion. Also notice that the scribbles in the band, for instance, they move along the band of the dress, the strap of the dress, but they also curve slightly. They start to change direction. You don't need to keep them going in the same direction all the way across. Keep putting little detail things into other parts of it as you go, like in the fan, like the extra part to the neck. Keep moving forward. Keep adding to every place that you find some place that you can put an edge to. Put it in there. Now, once you get most things in the right position using line, you can start building up with tone. And let me show you how that's going to work. We start adding tone across the face. Now this is the scariest part and probably one of the trickiest parts, because you're initially going to think, oh boy, that's too dark, or that starts to look like a beard, or anytime that your brain starts to identify it as something different, you're going to want to back up. I don't want you to back up. I want you to keep going forward, keep adding to. Notice as we added that little piece in there, again, like that, add that little piece in there at the bottom. Suddenly the lines across the lower part of the jaw don't seem quite so dark. They don't seem out of place. We keep adding more tone to it. Let's go back up to the top. Add tone in the dark area at the hair where it's supposed to be. Notice though that it also curves as it's being scribbled in place. It curves around. It adds more volume to it when you curve it. Keep adding little bit more here and a little bit more there. You'll notice too that now I'm going across what I've already done. You don't need to go in the same direction when you do the next run. In fact, it's better to go across it because you're building layer upon layer. As we build back into it, I'm going back down the side of the face, the whole side of the face. You'll notice it goes from the forehead all the way down the cheek, all the way across the top of the shoulder, and all the way down along the arm. That also needs to be darker. So we put that in. We start making things darker and darker. Places that have already been scribbled in once, you go across it, scribble across it. Keep adding more dark. Now, at this point you can start to intensify the darks because you got a really good sense of where things are supposed to be and how dark they're supposed to be in relationship to what's next to them, because that's not as dark as they're going to end up. But everything has to be built slowly from the ground up. So as we start to adding darker pieces where they're supposed to be, like along the band, that's a great place to start. But this is going to be a shocker because the instant I go back in and put really dark dots in the middle of the eyes, there's a tendency to think, ooh, that's too dark. What I want you to think instead is everything else is still too light. So keep moving forward. And remember that all grayscales are relative. So if it looks too dark right now, some parts look too dark right now, it's because the parts next to them are still too light. So keep adding detail. You can add more detail to it. Even as I start to put more shading in along the side of the nose, you can see how the eyes now start to look more like they are closer to the correct grayscale. Add more detail into place and it starts to build. Darken the hair at the top and things just improve. Get them darker and darker where they need to be. And now the eyes don't seem nearly too dark. They're much closer to what they're supposed to be. And they may even get darker as we continue on. So we're going to keep adding. And don't worry if something looks too dark. Just keep moving forward. Everything is about moving forward. We put more grayscale across the back of the shoulder. We delineate the edge of the shoulders a little bit more. Okay, now we're really going into the blacks. I don't want you to ever turn your pencil sideways and scribble a large pad of dark. Make all of your blacks using the tip of the pencil. always with overlaying scribbles. Go back in and make other parts darker where they need to be. Put in more black detail, like in the earring, for instance. You can even, don't forget the background. You can even get more darks into the background. The background helps to bring the foreground forward. Now you'll notice there where the eyes themselves suddenly get some shading. Things are starting to look more natural now. They need to be darker. See how they need to be darker? We get them darker. And add more details into the corners. Now the details in the face are starting to look too much, and that's not because they're too much, it's because everything else is not enough yet. So let's start adding more dark all the way around. Midtones across the face are really ballsy. You have to be ballsy to be able to put them on there. You have to just dive in and lay them in place and not worry too much about them. But notice that they're subtle lines. They're not dark, scratchy lines. They have to be subtle to start with. You can build up, but remember, you can't use an eraser. We're not talking about going back. So we add more darks into certain places. We bring up, see, now we've made the pupils even blacker than they were before. We're going now into the fan itself and also delineating the strap on the dress a little bit more, bringing it back up. Put more details into the darks around the certain aspects of the face, like around the mouth and the nose and the chin. Again, get back up into dark areas on the periphery, like the hair and the back, and keep bringing those back toward what they're supposed to be as far as the amount of dark compared to the other parts of them. Every step forward, you have to go back and bring the rest of the drawing with you. Keep pulling it up, bringing more into it. Every place can use something. Sometimes you need to delineate as you go. Okay, now, as we're building the image, you can make modifications where necessary. For instance, as we get into this part down in here, the shoulder needs to be further down to balance out the drawing. So we're going to drag the shoulder down a bit further and bring more shadow further down. We're going to bring more shading across the fan in front, because the fan has to have some shading too. Also along the chin. You notice that the shading on the chin that initially looked like it was a 5 o'clock shadow or a beard now looks like a correct shadow of the face and a correct shadow of the fan on it. So things that looked odd at the beginning will start to come together when you start to add more tone around it. You can also put in more detail into places. Go back in and add the detail where you need to. Don't finish detail in places. Add and keep knowing that you're going to add more later, that you will build on it. It's not about finishing something to move on. It's about bringing it up to this stage. Keep bringing it up, so you're adding more to it. Now, make sure that you add darks to the backgrounds as well while you're building up the details, because the backgrounds need to have darks in them. Because as you add darks to the background like that, it starts to feel more like it's part of the whole drawing. It's not so focused on the face that it's overwhelming. So we can now also see how much darker the background is, so we need to make aspects of the face darker as well. Keep putting it in, bringing up the detail. Keep bringing up more and more detail in the darks. Leave the lights alone and stay with the darks. You can put shading in the lights when the darks are dark enough to show you where you need the midtones. Keep coming along. You can now start to see where you need to add more actual delineation around the outside edges of things. One of the things about delineation in the outside edges is it makes the midtones and the lighter parts of the thing next to it look even more light and mid-tone. Start pulling in drawings around it, some of the drawings around it. Notice now we can get into midtones in the middle of the face like that, and it adds more depth. Notice the right hand eye. There's a tiny circle has been drawn, and that's to be left completely white because that's the highlight in the eye. I did that so that I could shade around it and make sure that the white paper was standing out. As we keep moving along, you're going to see that the drawing is starting to build in three-dimensionality because of the grayscale, the gray tones around it. If you look really closely, I want you to see how all of the surfaces are single line drawing. None of it is flat pad grayscale. It's all built upon each other. Each grid of scribble overlays at different angles and starts to add to the general gray tone. Builds all the way down. Now, more shading was added to the background to bring up the highlights of the figure. Now I want you to notice this. From there, you see how the face on the right-hand side is quite light, and so is the background. Once you put shading in the background, now you can see that the face is actually a highlight. It actually pops it out from the background. It is actually now becomes the brightest part of the entire drawing. So when you start to put that with the photo reference, you'll also start to notice that more shading can be added to the face if you wish. When you look at the photo reference, it's much darker in a whole lot of places. But there's sometimes you can just stop before you go that far, before you need to go that far. I also want you to notice this. Remember we talked about the mistake in the chin? I want you to notice the mistake is right there. And I want you to notice how once I have put the shading of the chin in place, it disappears and the real chin is in the right place because I stopped at the beginning and put it in the right place. That's basically my presentation for painting with pencil. I want you guys to give it a shot. If you have any questions, just email me and I can certainly talk you through it. Thank you very much for watching.